All right, Dan Corder here, Five Breakfast. I am so delighted to welcome one of the iconic business people, not just businesswomen, but iconic business people and most extraordinary success stories that South Africa knows. Her name is Magda Wierzycka. I hope I've got that right. Magda, thank you so much for joining us. We as Five Breakfast, everyone at 5FM got to go and pursue one massive interview of an inspirational person for Women's Month, and we thought of there could be no one more pioneering and iconic in the world of business than you. So thank you so much for joining us.
No, absolute pleasure to be here.
So Magda, you've got this absolutely unbelievable, almost unreal story starting with, I'm going to try and super synopsis it, spark notes it, and then you can help me out. But born in Poland, family moved to Austria in the early 80s, stayed in a refugee camp. If I read correctly, your parents had to dig trenches for money, managed to get to South Africa, after which, with not a lot of money, you managed to get into Pretoria Girls High School in Pretoria. You did extremely well. After that, managed to secure yourself a bursary which allowed you to study business and finances at UCT, and after that just rose and rose and rose in a bunch of iconic finance and fintech companies, all the way into boardrooms, into the position of CEO, started a company called Signia that is now dominating in South Africa and the world. Is that fair? Is that fair what I just said?
I think it's a very fair synopsis. I mean, I was born in communist Poland, so that's a very important part of my background, which is, under communism, everyone was equal. Everyone had exactly the same, not a lot, but exactly the same. And I think that has always stayed with me and at the back of my mind and guides a lot of things that I do today. I studied actuarial science at UCT. That was, very boring, but a very fortuitous degree to study because it taught me analytical thinking. And then, from that point on, I started working. I think, a couple of jumpstart jobs turned into a position at Coronation Fund Managers when Coronation was a startup. So I was employee number 14, ended up doing absolutely everything that no one else wanted to do.
Sounds like a startup, yeah.
It was a complete startup. I mean, my first office was a cupboard, which I shared with some filing paper,
Okay.
Literally. So those were my kind of Wild West experience days. I started my first business, a fund of hedge funds that was taken over by African Harvest, a small asset management company, which we managed to triple in size within 3 years. I took over as CEO. So based on that, I quickly had to invent a business model, and using the little capital we made out of the African Harvest transaction, we started Signia from scratch, 6 people in the room without really a business model.
Were you employee number 1 this time?
This time I was employee number 1. I had to hire the receptionist, had to buy, I found myself in this position of setting up offices and buying teacups and computers, one too many times. So we had to build everything from scratch, and we decided to do so by basically disrupting financial services. And it wasn't that difficult to do. We basically said, lower management fees, get rid of jargon, make what's complex, simple and understandable for people.
Sure.
And then I slowly transitioned into this executive chairman role because, I've always had this vision of challenging myself a little bit on the global stage, not only in South Africa, and yet my career has been largely focused in South Africa. And so I set up, with a partner, I set up a venture capital business in London. I had to set it up during the pandemic. We set up Signia right at the beginning of the global financial crisis.
Does any journalist ever call you and say, let me know when you're setting up a new business so I know something crazy is going to happen in the markets?
Indeed. So we managed to raise about, I think, 8 billion rand now that we're managing out of London. And, I kind of split my time now between South Africa, and I have certainly not left South Africa, despite what some of my competitors would love to believe.
Oh, Magda, that is an absolutely extraordinary story. Now that we have a really good grasp of all of these significant moments in your life, obviously all covered in your new book, Magda, My Journey, you've spoken at many moments and in the book about how difficult it has been and I guess continues to be a woman, I guess in all industries, but particularly in this kind of high-powered business world. Can you remember what it was like to start out in that kind of very male-dominated world and to try and forge a space for yourself?
I think the advantage I had in South Africa, and I have to say all credit to South Africa, it was much easier being a woman in business in South Africa than it is being a woman in business in the UK.
Fascinating. Okay.
Provided you were willing to work hard, and probably harder than most men, which I was. I never saw myself as a woman in a men's world. I just defined myself as someone who is, ambitious and hardworking in a work environment.
Sure.
And I think that was helpful in terms of a mindset. And this has happened to me a number of times. I get copied on emails in terms of setting up appointments, and people's PAs assume I'm the PA to my partner in the venture capital space. But that is the natural assumption in business in the UK, that if you are a woman copied on an email, you're the PA.
Sure. That is
That is
wild.
tougher to deal with than
Yeah, for
anything
sure.
I've ever had to deal with in South Africa.
Wow. In your book, also, you do mention what, at least to me, sounded like some very vicious victimization and bullying by other powerful people in one of the companies that you worked for before, often making you feel very isolated and alone. Do you think that there was anything in that where this man felt like he could behave however he wanted or as abusively as he felt like in your direction because you were a woman? Or did you think that he had some kind of general sensibility?
I think that he just felt very threatened. So whether he would have felt threatened by a man or whether he felt threatened by me being a woman,
Okay.
either way, probably the fact that I was a woman made it worse. But my overall arching sense of it was, even at the time, that he felt incredibly threatened
Okay.
by me. I happen to know more about retirement funds, about our clients, about the business than he did at the time.
Sure.
I'm sure he'll argue that point, but his way of managing me was to do what often gets done to women, and that is to get personal. So
Yes.
instead of saying, okay, bonus time, let's discuss your performance, his immediate words would be, let's not discuss your performance. Your performance is excellent. You brought in all the new business. You're doing this, you're doing that. Let's discuss the fact that you are a terrible human being. Let's discuss
Sure.
what so and so says about you, so and so said about you. And, you know, he was talking to a 25 or a 26-year-old me.
Yeah.
So don't look at me today and say, oh, please, why didn't you tell him to get lost? I was 25 and 26. I was
Sure.
trying my best. I was a young woman at that stage. And when dealing with women, it is so easy to distract a woman by focusing on her personality.
Okay.
And I'm not ashamed of the fact that, I shed many a tear.
Okay. Yeah.
And then, once he's done that, I am in no position to negotiate my bonus. I
Absolutely.
would take anything given to me gratefully and go and work harder. Whereas, a typical man would have listened to this nonsense and would have said, stop right there, not interested in what others say about me.
Okay.
Where is the money?
Yes.
I walked out of there and I said, I will never work for another man again. So that was the beginning of my entrepreneurial career.
Wow.
I
That
literally
is
walked out of there and said, never again.
wow, Magda. That's actually very wild. I've got goosebumps everywhere. Thank you so much for telling that story. What do you think in 2022 South African women need to hear or take more seriously to kind of empower themselves in this moment?
I think the message is that people need to get involved,
Okay.
not just sit around the braai on a Sunday criticizing.
Yes.
You need to arm yourself with knowledge. You can form these kind of communities that can make a difference, that can do things, tangible things. So I think to move South Africa out of where we are, we actually all need to get involved in running the country in whatever small way we can.
That's excellent. That's brilliant, Magda. Thank you so much for your time. I deeply, deeply appreciate this.
No, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.